content to get through, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about automating video creation and delivery processes for online advertising, but you can also do it for your owned media. Okay, so hi everybody, my name is Josh Dorward. I'm the Managing Director of Creative Automation at Cloudinary, and I'm very excited to be here today at our first experience event to share more with you about this exciting product. Prior to Cloudinary, I was founder and CEO of a company called Indivio, a meta-creative platform business partner specializing in video and image personalization for ads. We were in market for 5 years, pathfinding and pioneering use cases in personalization before being acquired by Cloudinary in December of 2021. I want to talk about the workshop agenda because creative automation is a new product at Cloudinary and it's generally a new industry category. I'd like to start by providing a brief background and introduction, including the reasons why creative automation is important and how the product works in order to give you the context to appreciate the second topic, which is a Q&A with our very special guest, Misha Kerkhoff from Jellyfish Digital, where we'll talk about how this technology is applied to solving real-world problems. Finally, I'd like to end with a few words on the product roadmap and looking ahead for what you can expect from creative automation at Cloudinary. Okay, kicking this off. Today, if you are a marketer, you are under tremendous pressure to generate ever-increasing amounts of creative content, and this is for several key reasons. The first is really driven by the pandemic and accelerated e-commerce. I think you've heard the stat that we've had about 10 years of acceleration in the last 2 years because of COVID, and this has dramatically increased the number of entrants in online retail, and the result is dramatically more competition for eyeballs, and this has resulted in increasing the rising cost of ads. At the same time, the digital marketing landscape has continued to become ever more complex and fragmented, with new ad formats and placements, and publishers even spawning each year. Prior to the pandemic, TikTok was just getting started, and today I think they did $4 billion last year and are looking to do $12 billion this year. There are more placements across more channels, adding to the pressure if you're a marketer to generate more creative content. So the last trend that I'm going to touch on is just consumer expectations around personalization. No matter what you really think about personalization, the evidence is very clear that customers love it when it's done correctly. And this is shown in the numbers. However, it's really difficult to create consistent personalization across all of your channels, adding to the pressure that marketers are already facing to generate ever-increasing amounts of content. And so this really, to summarize it, leads us to the main problem, which is, marketing teams know that customizing their content to be more relevant improves performance. The problem is that it's time-consuming and it's manual to customize your content, making it difficult to test and learn and ultimately to know what works. Now, there are a lot of reasons for why scaling your creative content is difficult. And this has to do with a few things: broken tools, workflows, and really a lack of know-how around designing for dynamic, because it's really a new thing. Now, running through these quickly, the industry standard design tools that are out there weren't really built for automation. And if you are using tools for automation, typically they fall short of enabling the control and flexibility around the visual effects that brands expect. Now, designers are frequently having to rebuild their templates in these third-party tools with limits that, they're not fully educated on, and this results in kind of compromised visual effects and creatives that fail to meet the exacting needs of brands who really want their creatives to be pixel perfect. At the same time, it's really difficult to prepare assets upstream for personalization, and it's equally difficult to activate assets once they've been created on publisher platforms. And we'll get into this a bit more when we talk with Misha here. And so the ideal solution in this case is one that enables relevant content to be generated at scale and without compromise using automation. And the approach that we've taken here is a little bit different because it automates the industry standard tools that creative and professional marketing teams already use. And here we're talking about Adobe After Effects, okay, which is the industry standard for post-production, video, and motion graphics editing, as well as online spreadsheet tools like G Sheets and integrations to the publisher platforms like Facebook Business Ads Manager. And so I wanted to get through the preamble, give you a little bit of background, and I want to show you basically how this works and talk about some of the features before getting into the Q&A. And so in terms of how creative automation works here at Cloudinary, everything starts with your creative optimization strategy. And this is how you want to personalize your creative for your audiences. And when you figure that out, we'll talk about that during the Q&A. When you figure that out, there are really three inputs that come into the system. The first is the design template. Again, this is made in native Adobe After Effects. Designers who are using this tool don't have to learn anything new. They just design the tool design in the tool as they normally would, and they simply mark the layers that they want to enable for dynamic. You know, the second input is really the data feeds. And the way to think about the data feeds, and they can come from a variety of sources, but think about it like a spreadsheet where the columns are the dynamic elements, okay, that are going to be tied to the design areas that have been marked dynamic, and the rows are unique creatives. And so every row is a unique creative, and this can come in from a variety of sources. This can come in from your PIM, this can come in from your CRM data, this can bring in assets from the Cloudinary DAM, and we'll talk about that as well. And the last input that comes in is really the media, or we call it ad templates. And depending on the destination for your personalized images and videos, it's very helpful to have an ad template. And what the system will do is it will actually iterate the different versions of the ads at the same time that it's creating the different version of the creatives, okay? And so, you know, when these come into the Indivio by Cloudinary system, hard files are generated. So these are MP4s, these are PNGs, animated GIFs. You can get hard files out of the system at any time, and you can export them to the Cloudinary DAM or any kind of fixed storage for use in your owned media. And again, if you're using this for ads, you can export this to paid media channels. And once they are exported, because you have so many more variations of creatives, you can then tie that back to engagement data and get a lot more granular insights into what in the creative is actually correlated to performance. With those insights, you can then feed that back into optimizing your creative strategy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what are the elements that can be customized within a template. And in short, there really are kind of no limits because the Indivio by Cloudinary system is built on After Effects, and kind of the special sauce is that we run After Effects in the cloud. This is a desktop application. It's not made for cloud usage, but this is part of what we have figured out. Really, you can customize anything. And so we're talking, you know, making images, video clips, colors, dynamic. You can even change, you know, scenes and durations or scene ordering. You can do different layouts. And a really powerful feature is conditional layers. And this is the idea of turning elements on or off based on the feed. And so being able to toggle on or off, you know, a promotional bug or a different layout. Pretty much there are no limits to what you can customize and make dynamic in a template that's made in After Effects. Now, this is the last slide on just the preamble here to give you a background on creative automation. But this is really about, you know, the data that you can bring in to make your content more relevant. And like I was saying, you know, we were in market for about 5 years, figuring out all the ways to make your creative more relevant using data. And, you know, this could include contextual data, so stuff like the user's location, or through a data partner, the local weather. Hey, what's the weather or the time of day? This might be some kind of history or CRM-based data where you have different offers based on the segmentation of your audiences. You want to show segment one thing, and segment two, a completely different offer. This could also be product data. This could be real-time pricing that comes in from a pricing feed. This could be unique selling propositions that come right off of your product detail page. And so the idea is to be able to activate your data inside of your creative. And the idea, in a few years, you should be able to squint, and many of the images and videos that you see will be a lot more tailored and more relevant, not in a creepy way, okay, but in a way that's helpful, okay? And so this is just to stimulate your imagination and idea of like, what is that next generation of visual creative going to look like? It's going to be data infused, and these are just some of the ways that you can bring data into your creative. Okay, and so with this background on what creative automation is, I'd like to introduce Misha from Jellyfish. Jellyfish is one of the largest independent agencies specializing in, amongst other things, paid advertising, and Misha's been working with the Indivio by Cloudinary system for over 2 years, automating creative and media workflows around image and video personalization. He has 8 years of paid social experience working in education, retail, and automotive verticals. Misha, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah. I'd like to start by going back to one of the problems that we talked about in the introduction currently facing marketers, and that is the rising cost of ads. And this is for a number of reasons, including rising inventory levels, reaching saturation points, the pandemic. I was hoping that you could talk about this and help the audience understand more of the reasons behind the rising cost of ads.
Yeah, so the obvious one is that it's getting more costly to get your ads in front of people. CPM, or cost per impressions, on Meta are up 61% year over year. TikTok is up 185%, and programmatic display is up 75%. On top of the rising costs of actually getting your ads in front of people, audiences are actually more aware of the ads that are around them, which is accelerating the ad fatigue effects and can double or triple your cost per actions that you're trying to get. A way around that, or a way to combat that ad fatigue, is to create more creatives, more iterations. But if you're using a professional creative team, their pricing structures aren't really scalable for the amount of frequency that you need to refresh on a steady cadence.
Enter creative automation solutions. And so talk us through the opportunity of using creative automation for your team here.
Yeah, so what we're seeing on this graph here is a correlation between one of our higher education partners, cost per leads, and the frequency at which we were launching new creatives. So in late 2019 and early 2020, we were noticing that CPLs were on the rise and that ad fatigue volatility was just all over the place. And a lot of that reason was because we didn't have the creative inventory to actually produce these creative refreshes on a regular basis. So this is at the same time that we started working with your team, Josh, and we were trying to figure out a way to not only just scale creative, but also figure out a workflow that can activate these much more easily. And starting in March, what we see is that the frequency of our creative refreshes started going up, and that our performance started improving slowly, and also the kind of the volatility of ad fatigue started going down as well. So this is kind of like a very powerful graph for us to educate our clients on this is why we need to, one, create a refresh creative on a regular basis, and then the necessity behind having a creative automation tool to provide the content for those creative refreshes.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's really powerful to see kind of the correlation between more frequent refreshes and a stabilization in your CPLs here, your cost per leads. Let's take a look at, talk us through some of these actual examples of refreshes that you were running.
Yeah, so these are a few of our dynamic image templates that we're using, and essentially what we're able to control is we're able to control the different people that are in the images, each of the text fields, primary and subcopy, we can change those in and out. The accent bar, like the yellow section, we can change that out. Background colors, also gradients, and then the logo. So we have quite a bit of variables that we're able to play with and try to figure out what works and what doesn't. On top of that, I think the number of templates that we have, the number of variables we can change, and the number of assets that we have for each of those variables can, I think, produce roughly 11 million different combinations. So we have quite a bit to work with.
That's a crazy number of combinations. And so, with something like that, let's dig in a little bit to the problem of actually executing the creative at scale. And, we've talked about this before. When you have a creative automation solution and you're able to really take the friction out of editing images and video at scale, you create a problem. Like, what if I hand your marketing team 1,000 new images or 1,000 new videos? How do you actually activate all of those and get value out of them, put them into the market? Maybe some of you in the audience have used publisher tools like Facebook Ads Manager. And if you have, you know that it's very click intensive. You need to upload your asset. You need to go through, we were just doing this the other day, you need to go through like 40 different clicks to set up a campaign with multiple ads. And so if you know that trying to set up 1,000 ads would be pretty much impossible, okay? And so talk to us about how you're using creative automation in the solution to actually get these ads into market efficiently.
Yeah, so ad activation was one of the first things that we thought about after understanding, okay, we're about to generate all these new variations of assets. We need a system in place that will allow us to kind of implement these quickly and also quality check these quickly based on the scale that we are anticipating. So we worked with your team and we explained that this is currently the workflow that we have, this is the workflow that we would like to have, and what came out of this was this demo here. What we're seeing is the bulk ad activation sheet. And within this Google Sheet environment, we're able to manage all of the asset variables, such as the videos, the image layers, even copy, and we're able to then take that information with a series of drop downs and say, okay, this ad needs to get this combination of things, et cetera. And on top of that, the images are then rendered and passed back into this sheet. We have a QA tab that allows us to kind of visually see everything real quickly to kind of spot check for any errors in the rendering. And on top of that, our practitioners can then also QA really quickly in line. And QAing is probably one of the most time-consuming and tedious things because you have to basically jump between several different docs and even the platform to see, is this lining up properly? So in this manner, we're able to kind of just go down an Excel sheet and be like, yep, and it works. So by having our entire ad activation process in one environment in this Google Sheet, we actually were able to kind of increase the volume of new assets that we were pushing live to 1,200 a month, which is about 260% more than what we were doing in 2020.
I know where you started from in terms of number of raw assets that your partner provided, so 1,200 a month is pretty intense. I could imagine that this number could be orders of magnitudes higher if you were, working on a large product catalog. But what you just saw here, the user never has to kind of switch context, and they're able to kind of stay. I know it's a pretty gnarly spreadsheet, but every one of these rows is a new ad and a new creative that's being created at the same time. And so, talking about saving time, what has been the impact of this combination, the ability to render at scale, okay, images and video, and the ability to activate ads at scale through this? What has that done to the practitioners and how they spend their time at Jellyfish?
Yeah, so we can kind of bucket a media practitioner's client time into about 4 categories, or 4 broad categories. And this is going to be starting with strategy, trafficking, optimizing, and then reporting. So strategy is where we're informing the client and the creative teams on new creative testing opportunities, as well as new platforms that we might want to launch for incremental gains. We then take those strategies and we traffic them, which means basically building all the campaigns, all the ads for them. And this is the area that gets really tedious. And while this client that we're working with isn't quite at the scale of some brands, I know that there are brands out there that will launch 10 to 15 new campaigns within a single month. And that's a large amount of time that you're just dealing with trafficking. And then on top of that, once you do traffic, you need to make optimizations during the flight times of those. And one of those optimizations that usually drive the biggest impact is going to be creative refreshes and creative iterations around them. And in order to understand that, you also need to have the data associated to those. So reporting requires us to kind of aggregate the data across all these different creative layers to understand what's working and what's not. And then we take that information, go back to the client and the creative teams to inform them on the next steps, as well as informing creatives on what areas they need to focus on for the next opportunities or next design implementations. So the allocation here that we're seeing, depending on your level in the company or in the agencies, and your experience and responsibilities. It's still going to be a mix in here. More junior levels will be more heavily involved with like trafficking and reporting. But this is kind of just our internal numbers of like how time is currently allocated based on these tasks. And when we think about value-added areas that we want to focus on, it's going to be strategy and optimization. The brands are paying us to provide them with new ideas and new concepts that we can launch and scale them. And then the other area is optimization as well. But the challenge that we wanted to solve with the bulk ad activation sheet was how can we reduce the time from these other two areas, such as trafficking and reporting. What we were able to do is cut basically both of those categories in half. And that has allowed us to spend more time focusing on the value-added areas. And this is all due to the way that we were able to kind of manage not only our ad activations within one environment, but also the way that we could allocate data back to those assets.
Got it. So this is a powerful chart. So before and after, and you're not only increasing the volume of assets that you're creating by an order of magnitude, you're increasing the volume of refreshes that you're doing to fight ad fatigue, but at the same time, you're reducing the amount of time that your practitioners are spending on these manual repetitive tasks. And it's incredible to see the value for clients that's created with higher value add. But I got to imagine the practitioners also love not having to be like sitting there clicking repetitively, right? So there's a quality of life aspect there. I find that very gratifying. And so, okay, this is awesome. Like you've given us some of the results and how this has transformed your practice internally. Let's talk about how this has actually transformed the personalization experience and the visual experience for your clients and your partners.
Yeah, so as Josh has mentioned earlier, like we know personalization works in driving consumers to make a decision, especially when that personalization is very, very relevant to them. Now, one of our online retail brands, they wanted to go a step further and try to figure out how could they use other data signals to provide even further relevance during the holiday season. And what we landed on was a weather, gender, and product personalization that we were able to kind of launch through the Indibio by Cloudinary product. We were able to tie different signals based on the weather in certain DMAs, the location data, and then as well as the products from the catalog. Because we also had your tool in place and our processes in place, after starting off really slow, which is 6 DMAs, it made it really easy to scale up to an additional 13 more, and without any additional creative resources or delays in those launches.
That's awesome. And so, I think what you're speaking to is like, there's a bit of a bigger lift when you set up your template and you set up your data feeds, but once you're set up, the ability to iterate quickly and scale, in this case to additional DMAs, is really simplified and streamlined. And what I love about the example that you're showing here, and this really kind of speaks to the After Effects aspect, but those little particle effects in the snow and the rain for different weather, those are awesome. I mean, you can't really get those in some of the proprietary tools that are out there. Another thing that I want to call out here is, and I think you were just in a DAM session, the automated background removal for product shots. It's awesome. It allows you to put your product shots, the kind of industry standard is like plain white background, okay? You see a lot of retargeting ads with plain white background, but by removing the product background, you're able to put it in situ in an environment that, makes a lot more sense, especially if you're having a cold weather campaign in this case. So I really love that, these look so, in a way, natural and embedded, and yet it's totally customized to location, weather, product, gender. And so, talk us through some of the results that you got. We see the visuals, talk us through some of the results.
Yeah, so if we focus on the business challenge first, it was how can we personalize our creative even more? And how do we do that in a scalable solution? And our solution was working with your team to kind of build this process out and utilize After Effects templates. And the results, we were able to generate 51% higher ROAS and 65% increase in purchase volume compared to any of the other ads that weren't running weather personalization. So we found it very successful initially with this increased personalization.
That's awesome. Great results. And now thinking back to the data trigger slide that I showed, what were some of the other personalization tactics that you tried to make the creatives more relevant?
Yeah, so I just want to hit on real quick. Ad platforms right now are basically putting in data privacy solutions that will eventually limit brands in understanding who they're targeting, who their audience is. So what we're currently working on is trying to figure out what are other personalization features, like broad subjects, that we can kind of work around and see if they're still effective. So a lot of our tests have been focused on that right now. So same brand, online retailer, they have a running shoe line. And we wanted to kind of play off the success of the weather to see what other ideas that we had. They were targeting more of a broad audience. So most of these people will not know who this brand is, what this product is for, et cetera. So we wanted a way to kind of say, put into context what this shoe can be used for and kind of the time of day that it could be used for. So we landed on the time of relevance of when runners would want to run, whether it's their morning run, their evening run, or like a run during lunch. And the results were kind of blew us out of the water. We were not anticipating this whatsoever. We were able to generate $625K in revenue off of 4,600 orders. Our cost per order was only $15, which is 33% lower than what we anticipated. And then our ROAS was 869%, far exceeding our benchmark of 159.
This is awesome. And this is on broad targeting, new audiences, amazing results. And I love the use of personalization here for time of day. It doesn't feel too creepy, and it kind of introduces the product in a way that is really accessible by a lot of people who are running enthusiasts. So this is amazing. I want to transition now to testing and learning. One of the things when we were getting started with Indivio and we had the ability to take the friction out of editing videos and images at scale, we went to Facebook, now Meta, and they basically told us, hey, your greenfield opportunity is to take video, which is a top of funnel brand awareness type of format, and bring it down the funnel and make it more testable. Okay, and they recommended that we integrate with their A/B testing service, and that kind of got us started. And this was now 5 or 6 years ago. And so that got us started on making the video format a more testable format. And so, how do you approach testing and learning, Misha?
Yeah, so I think first off, we need to understand what is actually in our creatives, and we need a way to measure against those different creative elements. So what we like to start out with is using kind of these categorical taggings that allow us to then easily attribute data during the data preparation and then track against that and push through into hypothesis tests. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, we just saw a great session with SEC Lock and SecLock and Christy and Sam demoing the Cloudinary dam. And you talk about extracting data from your assets and trying to do that at scale. This is a screenshot of the same dam system that uses, Google Vision AI, Amazon recognition, and other proprietary algorithms to extract different facets and features into tags. This might be, the location of a face, the emotions. This can include the text, the color, but a way to really streamline extracting data out of your image assets so that you can use them later. And you can also, as we heard in the last session, you can also use structured metadata. So if you have, a way to describe your assets, in a way that makes sense for you and your product, and you want to strictly enforce that, structured metadata is really the answer there. And so how are you using these tags to test and learn at Jellyfish?
Yeah, so you mentioned working with Facebook's A/B testing team, and the challenge that we've run into with A/B testing is, one, it's very slow. And when you're mass producing creatives like this, you really can't wait for a next decision. The other thing that we learned is that it almost always drives up our cost per actions and makes it very challenging for us to hit our partners' goals. And then lastly, we're never really learning anything about the relationship between creative elements. Because A/B testing, you're only testing, say, the messaging, and everything else has to stay the same. Or you're testing the people, and all the messaging has to stay the same. So again, it just gets to the point of, how do we know what works well with each other? So what we ended up doing was using this tagging system to be able to isolate messaging themes, to be able to isolate the people in the images. And we ran this through a hypothesis test. And our assumption was that the people in the image were going to drive the most or the best results. We thought that if the person, like a certain gender might work really well with a certain program. We thought that if it was like, say, professional versus casual attire, that would make a difference. And those are the types of insights that we thought we're trying to learn and uncover. And we were completely wrong. Out of all the cuts that we did, there was no indication that the person in the image would drive this impact. And it was actually the messaging types. And institutional messaging in particular was driving 105% higher click-through rate.
That's kind of a surprising finding. I mean, you look at these images, you kind of look at kind of the people, and kind of that's the dominant feature. You would think that would have a big effect on outcomes. That's really interesting, okay, and surprising. What did you, what did you do with these newfound insights after you discovered them?
Yeah, so outside of like the obvious, like this messaging works best out of all of them, what we were really able to kind of inform the client on was one, new testing opportunity. So it was obvious we wanted new messaging variants. We wanted to kind of plug and play, program with institutional messaging. How does that work together? Additionally, to take the visuals out of it, like, okay, people clearly aren't working, but is there, or I wouldn't say they're clearly not working, but is there an opportunity? Like, have we maxed out that visual aspect? So could we test like classrooms? Could we test job site locations that are relevant to the programs? And those are the kinds of insights that we can then go back to the client and say, let's see if we can try to tailor this and increase our performance. Another area of opportunity that we were able to kind of inform them on was where to allocate their creative resources. So if we think about trying to get new images and having to then edit those images that will fit our dynamic image templates, that is more costly and time consuming than for a copywriter to just generate, say, 20 characters of copy. And we know that that's going to have the biggest impact on performance and driving results. And then lastly, being able to kind of educate them on creative control for media practitioners. And what had happened when we first tested this was all the copy was actually delivered to us as a PNG, which made it very challenging for us to actually edit the way that we wanted it to line up or any of the new variations that we wanted. It would have to go through a creative person to get to us, and we had to make sure they would fit in the template. So it wasn't efficient. So by showing them that messaging was the thing that mattered the most for optimizations, by showing them that creative refreshes were going to drive optimal performance, so we needed that flexibility and that control in order to actually make those optimizations quickly. And what we were able to kind of uncover was that, because of the bulk ad activation sheet, we were able to kind of manage that brand safety concerns and be able to kind of quality check and ensure that we're not muddling message anywhere.
Got it. Yeah, the education piece for brands is super important, especially when it comes to anything that will affect, how the brand looks. At my previous company, I was at a company called Zazzle, which is a top e-commerce customization company, where we dealt a lot with big brands like Disney and bringing them through the customization maturity model. And I really love what you did in terms of, providing the data first on why you need the flexibility, but then having a tool that, we learned this at Zazzle, we learned the same thing at Indivia, and we have it now here at Cloudinary, where you can assure the brand that there is that control along with that flexibility so that they know that they will never put something in market that would violate, their brand. And that's just a super important education piece, And at the same time, that enables your team to do their job a lot better. With that flexibility, you can now edit and change things a lot closer to the time of activation instead of, hey, I need to make this change. Let's go back to the creative team and let's go through another 2-week, rev cycle of QA. Here, when you get a brand kind of on board and understanding that you can customize with control, it can change the whole practice as we saw on that previous chart. And so, as a final topic of our chat here, I want to focus on the creative optimization strategy and really how do you get started with that, using creative automation. And if you think back to that how it works slide, everything really starts with your creative optimization strategy. And the way to think about this, all personalization starts with segmentation, okay? Who's your audience and who are you trying to reach, and how do you think about segmenting them? Okay. The next thing really is, what data and assets do you have available to customize your visual experience to be more relevant? These are the data feeds part that I was talking about. This could be real-time pricing. This could be your product catalog. This could be different offers or messages for your audiences. So really thinking about that. And the third thing you have to ask yourself is really, what do you want to test and learn? What are the most important hypotheses that you want to test? How would you basically design your creative optimization strategy to isolate those and test those different factors? And so, with this as kind of a starting point on the creative optimization strategy, Misha, what advice do you have for folks who want to get started with creative optimization?
So the processes that we've put into place, they're not easy. They are complicated, and it's really important to understand your workflow. So who is owning the creative production process? Who is owning the asset management process, that is tagging all these and making sure that they're right? Who is then owning the ad activation to make sure that you're using the correct assets in the right locations? And then who's owning the measurement piece around those assets that's then, again, informing the creative team? So understanding your workflow, who owns each one of those processes, is crucial in order to actually scale properly. Next, I would say around your dynamic image templates or video templates, start small. Just make a couple variables that you can iterate on. You don't need to have 10. 10 is kind of exorbitant, especially to start out with. And odds are you're probably going to just set yourself up for a ton of errors if you don't have your processes in place. And then lastly, you want to be able to kind of figure out what your process is for ad activations and frequency. So start with just a couple campaigns, figure out how that all flows properly, and then you can start scaling up your frequency, your refresh frequency, or even the volume of campaigns that you are launching. Odds are you'll find that creative refreshes don't need to happen every week or 2 weeks. So if anything, you're probably just creating extra work for yourself. But you do want data to kind of support that, and you also want data to kind of support the variables within your templates that you should change, add, or whatever. So.
Awesome, Misha. These practitioner insights have been really great, and I hope they've stimulated some of your imagination and maybe some questions here at the end. So thank you so much, Misha. I want to close out with a few points on what to expect, the upcoming kind of roadmap at a super high level for creative automation at Cloudinary. And the first thing I want to talk to you don't really think about it until you have a creative automation system, but there's some very important second order problems, okay, that you run into when you're trying to launch personalization campaigns. One of them is the downstream, hey, I've created 1,000 videos, what do we do with it? We already talked about that. The other is really the upstream piece, okay? How do you get your assets into the system in a way that can be customized for all the placements and for personalization? And so we're talking about, image and video assets. How do you have the square, the horizontal, and the vertical version? And this is a big part of the reason why I'm so excited to be here at Cloudinary today. And that's because we have products like DAM and programmable media. That makes it super easy to automate the transformation with features like, smart content-aware cropping, so that you can have, a video clip that is focused on the subject matter of interest in a horizontal or a vertical, aspect ratio, so that you can use it to personalize your content in CA with templates. So I'm excited to share that we are in development of a better DAM to CA connector. And so we have a custom app coming out, probably early next quarter, where a custom app will come out of the DAM and be able to pre-process all of your assets and have them be formatted. You saw that gnarly spreadsheet. It will automatically pre-populate that gnarly spreadsheet with all of the assets coming out of DAM in a way that's going to be optimized for your personalization. So the next Better Together product combination that I really want to speak to is Something that I think is unique to Cloudinary, I've been in kind of the paid ad space for the last 5 or 6 years. I want to talk about owned media, okay? I mean, one of the problems that we talked about is going multi-channel and omni-channel really with your personalization campaigns. And something that's super unique about Cloudinary is that, we are totally set up to deliver on owned media. And we just spent this whole workshop talking about personalization in the creative content. There's kind of a whole nother side of personalization, and that's really in the delivery and optimization. And this is where our Media Optimizer product comes in. And this is the idea of developing or delivering rather those assets to the right browser and to the right device in a way that ensures a very fast and seamless experience. And so the idea that you could use the DAM to prep the assets, you could use creative automation for templating to generate the personalized versions of those new assets, and then you could use Media Optimizer to actually deliver those on your owned media if you're not doing it on paid media, is a very powerful combination. And so, the last thing I just want to touch on is paid channels expansion. And so today we already support dynamic catalogs on, channels like Meta, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest, and TikTok. We're going to be deepening the ad formats. And so on Meta today, we will actually create all the different iterations of the ad formats that are not based on dynamic catalogs. And we're working to expand this capability across the other channels as well. This is something more of an early next year capability. So you don't see a lot of dates on the roadmap, but I am talking to some of the features that we're excited about. And so with that, I think, we're at time. I'd really like to thank you for your attention. Are there any questions, that we can address about creative automation, personalization, paid media, any of these things? I know it's getting late in the day. Anything? Okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you guys so much for your attention. Yep. Enjoy the networking event.
Thank you.